Brazil, 2024. Part 1. A Life of Challenges and Dreams. The sun had just begun its descent over the horizon, casting a warm, golden hue across the sprawling city of Fortaleza. The streets, usually alive with the bustle of activity, were beginning to quiet down as evening approached. In a small, modest home on the outskirts of the city, Arthur Carvalho sat by the window, lost in thought as he watched the fading light dance across the worn furniture of the living room. The room was simple, with only the essentials: a small couch, a wooden table, a few chairs, and a crucifix hanging on the wall, a constant reminder of the faith that had carried Arthur through the darkest moments of his life. At 21 years old, Arthur had already lived a life filled with challenges that many might never face in a lifetime. His childhood, though not without moments of joy, was marked by hardship. His family had always struggled to make ends meet, with his father working long hours as a laborer to provide for the family. Arthur was the youngest of 3 children, and he often found himself alone, with his older siblings already busy with their own lives. His mother, a woman of deep faith, did her best to shield her children from the harsh realities of their circumstances, but even she couldn't protect Arthur from the inevitable pain that came with growing up in poverty. Arthur's father had been his hero, a man of few words but great strength, both physically and spiritually. He had taught Arthur the value of hard work, of perseverance, and of placing God above all else. But when Arthur was just 10 years old, his father passed away suddenly, leaving a void in the family that could never be filled. The loss was devastating for Arthur, and the sadness that followed was a heavy burden for a young boy to carry. He found solace in his mother's unwavering faith, and in the stories she would tell him about his father's kindness, generosity, and deep love for God. Those were the moments that Arthur treasured, the rare instances of peace and happiness that he held onto like precious gems. He remembered the nights when the family would gather around the table for a simple meal, his father leading them in prayer before they ate. He recalled the laughter that filled the house during those fleeting moments of joy, the warmth of his mother's embrace, and the sense of security that came from knowing that, no matter how difficult life became, they had each other. But as Arthur grew older, the reality of their situation became more apparent. The weight of responsibility began to press down on him, even as a child. He watched as his mother struggled to make ends meet, taking on multiple jobs to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. Arthur, too, began to take on odd jobs, doing whatever he could to contribute to the household. It was during these years that he developed a deep sense of empathy and compassion for others, always willing to help those in need, even if it meant going without himself. School was both a refuge and a battleground for Arthur. He was bright and eager to learn, but his love for knowledge was often overshadowed by the cruelty of his peers. The other children saw him as different, too quiet, too serious, too poor. Arthur was often the target of bullying, his kind nature mistaken for weakness. He would spend his days dreaming of a better world, one where people were kind and where he could pursue his dreams without fear of ridicule. But the reality of his situation kept those dreams at bay, forcing him to focus on survival rather than aspiration. Despite the challenges he faced, Arthur's faith in God never wavered. His mother had instilled in him a deep love for God and the belief that, no matter how difficult life became, God had a plan for him. This faith was his anchor, the one thing that kept him going when everything else seemed hopeless. He would spend hours in prayer, seeking comfort and guidance, asking God to help him find his path in life. As Arthur entered his teenage years, the pressure to succeed grew even greater. He knew that education was the key to escaping poverty, but the thought of spending years in college, confined to classrooms and textbooks, filled him with dread. Arthur was a dreamer, a visionary, someone who wanted to change the world in a tangible way. He had ideas, big ideas, about how to make the world a better place, but he felt trapped by the expectations of society and the limitations of his circumstances. Eventually, Arthur decided to give college a try, hoping that it might be the path to achieving his dreams. But it didn't take long for him to realize that the rigid structures of academia were not for him. He felt stifled, unable to express himself in the way that he wanted. The constant pressure to conform to the expectations of others weighed heavily on him, and he began to feel as though he was losing himself in the process. The dreams that had once filled him with hope began to fade, replaced by a deep sense of failure. Leaving college was one of the most difficult decisions Arthur had ever made. It felt like giving up, like he was throwing away any chance he had of making something of himself. The decision was met with disappointment and criticism from those around him. Friends, family, even strangers looked at him with pity or disdain, as if he had already failed at life before it had even begun. Arthur tried to ignore the hurtful comments, but they cut deep, leaving him feeling more isolated and alone than ever before. The isolation was exacerbated by the fact that Arthur had always struggled to form lasting friendships. He was a kind and generous person, always willing to help others, but for some reason, people often drifted away from him. The few friends he did make would eventually distance themselves, leaving Arthur to wonder if there was something wrong with him. He longed for connection, for someone who understood him, but it seemed that no matter how hard he tried, he was destined to walk his path alone. And yet, despite the loneliness, despite the disappointment, Arthur's spirit remained unbroken. He clung to his faith in God, believing with all his heart that there was a purpose to his struggles, even if he couldn't see it yet. He prayed for guidance, for the strength to keep going, and for a sign that he was on the right path. He knew that God had a plan for him, and he was determined to see it through, no matter how difficult the journey might be. As the years passed, Arthur faced one challenge after another. Financial struggles became a constant source of stress, with bills piling up and no steady income to rely on. He tried to start small businesses, hoping that one of them might take off, but each one failed, leaving him more disheartened than before. His family, too, was struggling, and Arthur felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him, knowing that he needed to find a way to help them. Despite the hardships, Arthur never stopped dreaming. He envisioned a world where people were kind to one another, where the environment was protected and cherished, and where everyone had the opportunity to pursue their dreams. These dreams were what kept him going, even when everything else seemed hopeless. He knew that if he could just find a way to make those dreams a reality, he could not only change his own life, but also make a difference in the lives of others. But as the days turned into months, and the months into years, the reality of Arthur's situation became more dire. The financial crisis that had been looming over him and his family reached a breaking point. The bills were relentless, and the weight of his responsibilities grew heavier with each passing day. Arthur found himself in a constant state of anxiety, his mind racing with worry, his heart heavy with the fear of failure. Yet, through it all, Arthur remained steadfast in his faith. Every morning, he would rise before the sun, kneel by his bed, and pray with all his heart. He prayed for guidance, for strength, for the wisdom to find a way out of the darkness that surrounded him. He fasted, hoping that his sacrifice would bring him closer to God, that it would show his devotion and earn him the blessings he so desperately needed. Arthur's relationship with God was the cornerstone of his life. He believed that, no matter how difficult things became, God was always with him, guiding him, protecting him. And so, even in the face of overwhelming adversity, Arthur continued to place his trust in God. He knew that, in time, God would reveal his plan, that the struggles he faced were only temporary, and that eventually he would find the path that God had laid out for him. One night, as Arthur lay in bed, his mind racing with thoughts of how to make ends meet, he found himself overcome with emotion. Tears welled up in his eyes as he thought of his family, of their struggles, of the dreams that seemed to be slipping away. He cried out to God, begging for help, for a sign, for anything that would show him the way forward. And as he prayed, he felt a sense of peace wash over him, a quiet but powerful reassurance that God was listening, that everything would be all right. Little did Arthur know, that moment of surrender would mark the beginning of a miraculous turnaround in his life. A turnaround that would not only change his circumstances, but also reaffirm his faith in ways he had never imagined. The challenges he had faced, the pain and loneliness he had endured, were all leading him to a place of greater purpose. A purpose that would soon be revealed in the most unexpected and extraordinary way. Part 2. The Miraculous Turnaround. The days had grown shorter as the year neared its end, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the streets of Fortaleza. Arthur sat at a small table in his modest kitchen, a cup of lukewarm coffee cradled in his hands. The room was quiet, save for the occasional creak of the old wooden floorboards and the distant hum of traffic outside. It had been another long day of fruitless job searching and hustling to make ends meet, and Arthur was feeling the weight of it all more acutely than ever. He had spent the morning visiting potential employers, leaving his resume at various businesses around the city. But each encounter had ended with the same polite refusal. "We're not hiring at the moment," they would say, or "We'll keep your information on file." Arthur would nod, thank them for their time, and leave with a sinking feeling in his chest. He had heard these lines so many times that they had begun to feel like a script, one that offered no hope, no opportunity. The financial strain on his family was becoming unbearable. The bills continued to pile up, and the small savings he had managed to scrape together were quickly dwindling. Arthur's mother tried to remain optimistic, but he could see the worry etched on her face, could hear the strain in her voice when she spoke. She had always been his rock, the one who held the family together through thick and thin, but even she was beginning to show signs of wear. As he sat there, lost in thought, Arthur's eyes fell on a small notebook lying on the table. It was old, the edges frayed, and the cover worn from years of use. He picked it up, flipping through the pages filled with notes, ideas, and sketches, remnants of dreams that had once seemed so attainable. Among the pages, one particular entry caught his attention. It was a business plan he had drafted years ago, an idea that had sparked from his deep desire to inspire and uplift others through media. Arthur had always believed in the power of storytelling, in the ability of a well-crafted message to touch hearts and change lives. The plan outlined a small media company that would create educational content, motivational videos, and short films, all centered around Christian values and positive messages. At the time, the idea had felt too grand, too far beyond his reach, but now, as he stared at the pages, something stirred within him. Could this be the sign he had been praying for? The answer he had sought during those long hours of prayer and fasting? Arthur felt a quiet conviction settle over him, a sense of purpose that had been missing for so long. He knew that the journey ahead would be difficult, that the odds were stacked against him. But for the first time in what felt like forever, he felt a spark of hope. Without hesitation, Arthur began to refine the plan. He stayed up late into the night, poring over every detail, thinking through the logistics, the potential challenges, and the ways he could overcome them. He had no money to invest, no resources to draw from, but he had something far more valuable: faith. Arthur believed, with every fiber of his being, that if this was God's will for him, then God would provide a way. The next morning, Arthur woke with a renewed sense of determination. He knew that he needed to start small, to take one step at a time, and trust that God would guide him the rest of the way. He found a tiny office space in the heart of Fortaleza, just big enough for a desk, a chair, and a computer. The rent was low, but even that was a stretch given his current financial situation. Still, Arthur took a leap of faith and signed the lease, knowing that this was where his journey would begin. He named his company Luz y Vida, Light and Life, a reflection of his mission to bring light into the darkness and life to those who needed it most. The name itself was a prayer, a declaration of his intent to glorify God in everything he did. With little more than his passion, his faith, and a borrowed computer, Arthur set to work. The early days were grueling. Arthur spent hours at the tiny desk, writing scripts, designing visuals, and editing videos. He reached out to local churches, schools, and community organizations, offering his services and sharing his vision. Most people were skeptical, unwilling to take a chance on an unknown startup with no track record, but Arthur pressed on. He wasn't doing this for recognition or wealth. He was doing it because he believed it was his calling, the path that God had set before him. His first few videos were simple, short, motivational clips that he posted on social media, hoping to gain traction. At first, the response was lukewarm. The videos attracted only a handful of views, and Arthur began to question whether he had made the right decision. Doubts crept in, whispers of fear that maybe this was just another in a long line of failed attempts. But Arthur refused to give up. Each day, he would begin with prayer, asking God to guide his work, to bless his efforts, and to use his content to touch the lives of others. He fasted regularly, seeking to deepen his connection with God and to remain focused on his mission. And slowly, steadily, things began to change. One afternoon, as Arthur was editing a video about the power of faith during difficult times, he felt a sudden inspiration. The words seemed to flow effortlessly, the images aligning perfectly with the message he wanted to convey. He finished the video and uploaded it, praying that it would reach the people who needed to hear it. The next morning, Arthur was startled awake by the incessant buzzing of his phone. Groggy and disoriented, he grabbed the device, his eyes widening in disbelief as he saw the notifications flooding in. His video had gone viral overnight. It was being shared across social media platforms, drawing thousands of views, comments, and messages from people who had been moved by its message. The response was overwhelming. People from all walks of life reached out to Arthur, sharing their stories, their struggles, and how the video had given them hope. Churches and organizations began contacting him, asking for more content, offering partnerships, and even donations to support his work. It was as if the floodgates had opened, and God's blessings were pouring down upon him in ways he had never imagined. Within a matter of days, Luzi Vita went from being a struggling startup to a thriving media company. The money that began to flow in was more than Arthur had ever dared to hope for. He watched in awe as the numbers in his bank account grew, the financial pressure that had weighed on him for so long lifting as if by a miracle. But Arthur knew that this was more than just good fortune. It was God's provision, a direct answer to the prayers he had whispered in the quiet of his small apartment, the cries for help that he had poured out to God in his darkest moments. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Arthur fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face as he thanked God for his mercy, his kindness, and his unwavering faithfulness. That evening, Arthur gathered his family together, sharing the incredible news with them. His mother, who had always been his greatest supporter, embraced him with tears of joy, her heart swelling with pride. They celebrated together, not just the financial success, but the realization that God had indeed heard their prayers and had responded in the most extraordinary way. But Arthur's joy was not just for himself. He knew that he had been blessed so that he could be a blessing to others. The very next day, he began to give back. He used his newfound wealth to pay off his family's debts, ensuring that his mother would never have to worry about money again. He provided food, water, and clothing to the homeless, visiting shelters and distributing resources to those in need. He also reached out to friends and extended family members, offering them support and assistance. True to his promise to God, Arthur made a substantial offering to a small, underfunded church that had been struggling to keep its doors open. The pastor, a humble man who had dedicated his life to serving the poor, was moved to tears by Arthur's generosity. Together, they prayed, thanking God for his provision and dedicating the gift to furthering his kingdom. As Arthur walked out of the church that day, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. For the first time in a long time, he knew that he was exactly where he was meant to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do. His journey had been long and difficult, filled with moments of doubt and despair, but it had led him to this place, this moment of divine purpose. In the days that followed, Arthur's work continued to grow. The success of Luz e Vida opened new doors, bringing opportunities he had never imagined. But through it all, he remained grounded in his faith, constantly reminding himself that this was all God's doing, not his. He made it a point to start each day with prayer, seeking God's guidance in every decision, every step. Arthur knew that this was only the beginning. God had opened a door for him, and now it was up to him to walk through it, to continue the work that had been entrusted to him. He was no longer the boy who had been plagued by doubt and fear, no longer the young man who had been ridiculed for his dreams. He was a servant of God, called to bring light and life to the world, and he was ready to fulfill that calling with all his heart. The road ahead would undoubtedly bring new challenges, new trials, but Arthur was prepared to face them, knowing that with God by his side, nothing was impossible. As he stood in his small office, looking out at the bustling streets of Fortaleza, Arthur whispered a prayer of thanks, his heart full of hope and anticipation for what was to come. Part 3. Building a Legacy. Arthur Carvalho's life had transformed almost overnight, but with his newfound success came a deep sense of responsibility. He was no longer just a young man with a dream. He was now the founder of a growing media company, Luz e Vida, that had begun to touch lives far beyond his humble beginnings. The small office space where it all started now buzzed with activity, the air filled with the hum of computers, the murmur of conversations, and the tapping of keyboards. The atmosphere was one of purpose and passion, as each team member worked tirelessly to bring Arthur's vision to life. The office itself had undergone a transformation as well. What had once been a tiny, cramped room was now a larger, more functional space, spread across multiple rooms in the same building. The walls were adorned with inspirational quotes, Bible verses, and posters of the various projects they had completed. A large wooden cross hung in the main room, serving as a constant reminder of the faith that had brought them to this point. The furniture was still simple, reflecting Arthur's modest tastes, but everything was arranged with care, creating an environment that was both professional and welcoming. Arthur's team had grown too. He had carefully selected individuals who shared his passion for spreading positive messages and who were committed to the company's mission of glorifying God through media. Among them was Lucas, a talented videographer with a knack for capturing the essence of a story through his lens. There was also Maria, a gifted writer whose words could move hearts and inspire change. Together, they formed the core of Luz e Vida, each bringing their unique skills and perspectives to the table. The success of Luz e Vida had not gone unnoticed in the city of Fortaleza. Local churches, schools, and community organizations began reaching out to Arthur, eager to collaborate and support his work. Arthur's content was being shared widely, not just within the Christian community, but also among those who were drawn to the uplifting and hopeful messages that Luz e Vida produced. The company's reach extended beyond the borders of Fortaleza, with their videos and articles being viewed and read by people across Brazil. Despite the growing demands on his time and energy, Arthur remained deeply committed to his mission. He continued to work long hours, often staying late into the night to ensure that every project met the high standards he had set. He was involved in every aspect of the business, from brainstorming ideas with his team to editing the final cuts of videos. But no matter how busy he became, Arthur never lost sight of the reason he had started Luz e Vida in the first place: to serve God and to bring hope to those who needed it most. As the company grew, Arthur found himself increasingly drawn to projects that could make a tangible difference in the world. He had always believed that the media could be a powerful tool for change, and he was determined to use his platform to address some of the most pressing issues facing society. One of his earliest initiatives was a series of videos focused on environmental conservation, highlighting the importance of protecting God's creation. These videos quickly gained traction, sparking conversations and inspiring action within the community. Arthur's passion for environmental issues was deeply rooted in his childhood memories of exploring the natural beauty of Sarah. He remembered the joy of running through fields, climbing trees, and swimming in the crystal-clear rivers of his homeland. But he had also witnessed the destruction of these landscapes, the pollution and deforestation that threatened the delicate balance of nature. Arthur knew that if he was to make a lasting impact, he needed to do more than just raise awareness. He needed to be part of the solution. With this in mind, Arthur began to explore ways to expand Luz y Vida's influence beyond the realm of media. He envisioned a company that could create real, sustainable change, one that would not only inspire people, but also provide them with the tools and resources they needed to make a difference. This vision led to the founding of his second company, Novaterra, New Earth, a technology firm dedicated to solving humanitarian and environmental problems. Novaterra was unlike any other company Arthur had ever imagined. It was a place where innovation met compassion, where the brightest minds worked together to create solutions that could improve the lives of people around the world. The company's mission was clear: to develop technologies that would address issues such as clean energy, sustainable agriculture, and access to clean water. Arthur believed that these were not just technological challenges but moral imperatives, responsibilities that he and his team were called to fulfill. The launch of Novaterra was a bold step, one that required significant investment and a leap of faith. Arthur poured much of the revenue from Luz y Vida into the new venture, trusting that God would bless his efforts just as he had done before. The early days were filled with challenges: securing patents, attracting investors, and assembling a team of engineers and scientists who shared Arthur's vision. But Arthur was undeterred. He had faced adversity before, and he knew that with perseverance and prayer, he could overcome any obstacle. As Novaterra began to gain momentum, Arthur found himself increasingly in the public eye. He was invited to speak at conferences and seminars, sharing his experiences and the lessons he had learned along the way. People were drawn to his story, inspired by his journey from a struggling young man with nothing but a dream to a successful entrepreneur making a real difference in the world. But Arthur remained humble, always quick to credit God for his success and to remind others that he was simply a servant, doing the work that God had called him to do. One of Novaterra's earliest projects was the development of a solar-powered water purification system designed for use in remote communities. The idea had come to Arthur during one of his many prayer sessions, as he reflected on the countless people around the world who lacked access to clean drinking water. He knew that this was a problem that needed to be addressed urgently, and he believed that technology could provide the solution. The project was ambitious, requiring extensive research, development, and testing. Arthur and his team worked tirelessly, often facing setbacks and challenges that seemed insurmountable. But through it all, Arthur remained steadfast in his belief that God had led him to this project for a reason, and that with faith and perseverance, they would succeed. After months of hard work, the first prototypes were finally ready. Arthur and his team traveled to a remote village in the Amazon rainforest, where clean water was scarce and the need was dire. As they set up the system and watched the clear, purified water begin to flow, Arthur felt a profound sense of fulfillment. This was why he had started Novaterra, not for profit or recognition, but to make a tangible difference in the lives of people who needed it most. The villagers were overjoyed, their gratitude overwhelming. For many, this was the first time they had access to clean, safe drinking water, a basic necessity that so many take for granted. Arthur spent time with the villagers, listening to their stories, praying with them, and sharing his vision for a better world. It was a moment of deep connection, a reminder of the power of faith and the importance of using one's gifts to serve others. As Novaterra's reputation grew, so did its impact. The company continued to develop new technologies, each project driven by a desire to solve real-world problems and to bring hope to those who had none. Arthur's vision of a better world, a world where people cared for each other and for God's creation, was becoming a reality, one step at a time. Back in Fortaleza, Luz y Vida continued to flourish. The content they produced reached millions, spreading messages of faith, hope, and love across Brazil and beyond. Arthur remained deeply involved in the day-to-day operations, working closely with his team to ensure that every video, every article, every project reflected the core values that had guided him from the beginning. But even as his companies grew and his influence expanded, Arthur never lost sight of what mattered most. He continued to live simply, staying close to his roots and maintaining the humility that had always defined him. He made time for his family, never forgetting the sacrifices they had made for him and the support they had given him through the years. He remained active in his church, using his resources to support its ministries and to help those in need. Arthur knew that his success was not just a result of his hard work or his business acumen. It was a gift from God, a manifestation of the faith that had carried him through the darkest times. And with that gift came a responsibility, a calling to use his blessings to bless others. Whether through Luz e Vida's inspirational content or Novaterra's groundbreaking technologies, Arthur was committed to making a difference, to leaving a legacy of faith, generosity, and compassion. As he stood in the main office of Luz e Vida one evening, watching his team wrap up another day of work, Arthur felt a deep sense of peace. The road had not been easy, and there were undoubtedly more challenges ahead, but he was ready for whatever the future held. He knew that as long as he kept his eyes on God, as long as he remained faithful to the calling he had been given, he would continue to make a difference in the world. The legacy Arthur was building was not just one of business success or technological innovation. It was a legacy of faith, of using one's gifts to serve others, of making the world a better place in the name of God. And as he looked around at the faces of his team, at the cross on the wall, at the framed pictures of the projects they had completed, Arthur knew that this was only the beginning. With God's guidance, there was no limit to what they could achieve. Part 4. Facing Challenges with Faith. The growth of Arthur's companies, Luz e Vida and Novaterra, brought with it not only success but also an array of challenges that tested his resolve, his faith, and his leadership. The initial momentum that had driven both ventures began to slow as the realities of managing expanding businesses set in. Each day presented a new set of obstacles, and the demands on Arthur's time and energy became overwhelming. The headquarters of Luz e Vida had transformed from a small, buzzing office into a larger, more sophisticated operation. The new office space, while still modest, was now spread across several floors in a modern building in the heart of Fortaleza. The walls of the main floor were lined with monitors displaying the latest content being produced, news about upcoming projects, and metrics tracking their impact across Brazil and beyond. The office hummed with activity, a testament to the company's growth and success. However, with growth came complexity. Managing a team of creative individuals, each with their own vision and ideas, was no easy task. Arthur found himself constantly mediating disputes, juggling priorities, and making difficult decisions that would determine the direction of the company. The pressure to maintain the company's standards of quality and faithfulness to its mission weighed heavily on him. The situation at Novaterra was even more challenging. The company, which had quickly gained a reputation for its innovative solutions to environmental and humanitarian problems, was now facing a series of setbacks that threatened to derail some of its most important projects. The solar-powered water purification system, which had been a groundbreaking success, was now facing production delays due to supply chain issues. Additionally, a new project aimed at developing sustainable agriculture practices in drought-prone regions of Brazil had hit a roadblock when local governments imposed unexpected regulations. Arthur spent long hours in meetings negotiating with suppliers, working through legal challenges, and trying to find solutions to problems that seemed insurmountable. The stress was palpable, and there were moments when he felt like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. His mind raced with worries about the future of his companies, the people who depended on him, and whether he was capable of overcoming the obstacles in front of him. Despite these challenges, Arthur's faith remained unshaken. He continued to rise early each morning, spending the first hours of the day in prayer, seeking God's guidance and strength. These moments of quiet reflection became his refuge, a time when he could lay his burdens at God's feet and find the peace that eluded him during the rest of the day. He knew that he could not do this alone, that he needed God's wisdom to navigate the complex and often treacherous waters of business. One of the most difficult challenges Arthur faced was the pressure to compromise his values in order to achieve success. As Luz e Vida grew, so did the temptation to produce content that would appeal to a broader audience, but might dilute the company's core mission of spreading Christian values. There were offers from major media companies to partner with Luz e Vida, promising greater exposure and financial gain, but at the cost of creative control and the integrity of their message. Arthur wrestled with these decisions, knowing that the wrong choice could undermine everything he had worked so hard to build. He sought counsel from his mentors, his team, and most importantly, from God. In prayer, Arthur found clarity. He would not compromise the mission of Luz e Vida for the sake of worldly success. He would remain true to the calling that God had placed on his heart, even if it meant turning down lucrative opportunities. The decision to stay the course was not without its consequences. There were times when Luz e Vida faced financial strain, when the rejection of certain partnerships led to a loss of potential revenue. But Arthur believed that God would provide, as he always had, and that the company's faithfulness would ultimately be rewarded. As the months passed, the challenges intensified. The setbacks at Novaterra began to take a toll on Arthur's team, and the morale among his employees started to wane. The delays in production meant that the communities they were trying to help were left waiting, their needs unmet. Arthur felt the pressure mounting, knowing that every day of delay was another day that people were suffering. In the midst of this, Arthur was dealt another blow. His mother, who had been his greatest source of support and inspiration, fell seriously ill. The diagnosis was grim: advanced cancer with little hope of recovery. Arthur was devastated. His mother had been the rock of their family, the one who had held them together through all the hardships. Now, as she lay in a hospital bed, weak and frail, Arthur felt a deep sense of helplessness. He spent every moment he could by her side, praying for a miracle, for God to heal her as he had healed so many others. But despite his prayers, her condition continued to deteriorate. Arthur's faith was tested in ways it had never been before. He had always believed that God would provide, that he would never abandon him. But now, in the face of losing his mother, those beliefs were challenged. In those dark moments, Arthur found himself questioning God's plan. He struggled to understand why, after everything they had been through, his mother was being taken from him. He wrestled with anger, grief, and doubt, feelings that he had kept buried for so long. But even in his despair, Arthur never turned away from God. He continued to pray, to seek comfort in Scripture, and to lean on the support of his family and friends. One evening, as he sat by his mother's bedside, holding her hand as she slept, Arthur felt a deep sense of peace wash over him. It was as if God was whispering to him, reminding him that his ways are not our ways, and that his plans are far greater than we can comprehend. Arthur realized that his mother's life, whether long or short, was in God's hands, and that all he could do was trust in his wisdom and grace. With this renewed sense of faith, Arthur returned to his work with a determination that surprised even himself. He poured himself into the projects at Novaterra, working with his team to find creative solutions to the problems they faced. He refused to let the setbacks define them, and instead used them as opportunities to learn, to grow, and to innovate. One of the most challenging aspects of the work at Novaterra was navigating the complex web of regulations and bureaucratic red tape that often hindered their progress. The project aimed at developing sustainable agriculture practices had been particularly difficult, with local governments imposing unexpected restrictions that threatened to derail their efforts. Arthur knew that he needed to approach these challenges with both wisdom and diplomacy. He reached out to local leaders, not with demands, but with a willingness to listen, to understand their concerns, and to find common ground. He also enlisted the help of legal experts and advocates who shared his vision, forming a coalition that could effectively navigate the political landscape. Through persistence, patience, and prayer, Arthur and his team were able to make progress. They secured the necessary approvals and partnerships, allowing the project to move forward. The Sustainable Agriculture Initiative, which aimed to provide drought-resistant crops and innovative farming techniques to struggling farmers, was finally underway. It was a victory hard won, and one that reinforced Arthur's belief in the power of faith, perseverance, and collaboration. As Novaterra's projects gained momentum, so did the impact of Luz e Vida. The media company continued to produce content that resonated with audiences across Brazil, touching hearts and changing lives. Arthur's decision to remain true to the company's mission, despite the pressures to conform, proved to be the right one. The stories they told, the messages they shared, were reaching people in ways that were both profound and transformative. One particularly successful campaign was a series of documentaries highlighting the work of small, grassroots organizations that were making a difference in their communities. These stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things struck a chord with viewers, reminding them of the power of individual action and the importance of community. The documentaries not only raised awareness, but also inspired viewers to get involved, to support these causes, and to make a difference in their own ways. Throughout this period, Arthur's relationship with his team grew stronger. He made it a priority to support his employees, to be there for them not just as a boss, but as a mentor and a friend. He organized team-building activities, created opportunities for professional development, and made sure that everyone felt valued and appreciated. He knew that the success of Luz e Vida and Novaterra was not just about the work they did, but about the people who made that work possible. Arthur also found strength in his community. His church, which had always been a source of support, rallied around him during this difficult time. The members of his congregation prayed for him, his mother, and his businesses, offering encouragement and reminding him that he was not alone. These acts of kindness and solidarity were a testament to the power of faith and community, and they gave Arthur the strength to keep going. In the end, Arthur's mother passed away peacefully, surrounded by her family. It was a painful loss, one that left a void in Arthur's heart that would never fully heal. But he took comfort in knowing that she was with God, free from pain and suffering, and that her legacy of faith and love would live on in the lives of those she had touched. As Arthur stood by her grave, the finality of her passing hit him hard. But he also felt a deep sense of gratitude for the time they had shared, for the lessons she had taught him, and for the faith that she had instilled in him. He knew that everything he had accomplished, everything he had built, was because of the foundation she had laid in his life. And as he looked out at the faces of the people who had come to pay their respects, he realized that her influence had extended far beyond their family. She had touched countless lives, just as he hoped to do through his work. Arthur returned to his work with a renewed sense of purpose. The challenges he faced had not diminished, but his resolve had only strengthened. He knew that there would be more obstacles ahead, more moments of doubt and difficulty, but he was ready to face them. His faith had been tested, and it had emerged stronger, more resilient, and more deeply rooted in the belief that with God, all things were possible. The legacy that Arthur was building was not just about the businesses he had created or the projects he had launched. It was about the lives he had touched, the hope he had inspired, and the faith that had carried him through every trial. It was a legacy that honored his mother, his family, and most importantly, God. And as he looked to the future, Arthur knew that the best was yet to come. With God by his side, he would continue to make a difference in the world, one step at a time. Part 5. A legacy of faith and generosity. 3 years had passed since the miraculous turnaround in Arthur Carvalho's life, and in that time, his journey had led him to places he had never imagined. What began as a small media company had grown into a movement of hope and faith that touched countless lives across Brazil. But Arthur knew that his work was far from over. His vision had always been bigger than just one company, and now, with God's blessings, he was ready to take the next step in fulfilling his mission. One of the most significant milestones in Arthur's journey was the establishment of Hospital de Esperança, Hospital of Hope, a state-of-the-art medical facility that provided free health care to those in need. The hospital, located in a rural area of Brazil where access to medical care was limited, was a dream that Arthur had nurtured for years. He had always believed that health care was a fundamental right and that no one should be denied the care they needed because of their financial situation. The hospital was a testament to Arthur's faith and determination. It had taken years of planning, fundraising, and countless prayers, but finally, the doors of Hospital de Esperança were open, welcoming patients from all walks of life. The building itself was a modern, yet welcoming structure, designed to reflect the warmth and compassion that would define the care provided within its walls. Large windows allowed natural light to flood the interior, creating a bright and airy atmosphere that contrasted with the often bleak surroundings of the rural community it served. The hospital was equipped with the latest medical technology, and the staff included some of the best doctors and nurses in the country. But what truly set it apart was the spirit of love and service that permeated every aspect of its operation. Arthur had personally selected each member of the staff, not just for their medical expertise, but for their commitment to the hospital's mission. Every doctor, nurse, and support staff member shared Arthur's belief that healthcare was a ministry, a way to serve God by serving others. Arthur was deeply involved in every aspect of the hospital's operation. He spent time with the staff, listening to their concerns, encouraging them, and reminding them of the importance of their work. He also made it a point to meet with patients, to hear their stories, and to pray with them. For many of these patients, Hospital de Esperança was not just a place of healing. It was a place of refuge, a sanctuary where they felt cared for and loved. One of the first patients to be treated at the hospital was a young boy named Miguel, who had been suffering from a congenital heart defect. His family, poor and without access to proper medical care, had watched helplessly as Miguel's condition worsened over the years. When they heard about the new hospital, they traveled for days to reach it, hoping against hope that something could be done to save their son. Miguel's case was complex, and the doctors knew that the surgery he needed was risky. But they also knew that this was exactly the kind of challenge they had been called to face. Arthur met with Miguel's family, offering them words of comfort and praying with them for a successful outcome. The surgery was long and difficult, but thanks to the skill of the medical team and the grace of God, it was a success. Miguel made a full recovery, and for the first time in his life, he was able to run and play like other children his age. The news of Miguel's recovery spread quickly, and soon, people from all over the region were coming to Hospital de Esperança in search of healing. The hospital became a beacon of hope for those who had nowhere else to turn, a place where miracles happened every day. As the hospital's reputation grew, so did the demands on its resources. The need for medical care in the region was overwhelming, and despite their best efforts, the staff often found themselves stretched thin. Arthur knew that they needed more funding, more supplies, and more staff if they were to continue providing the level of care that their patients deserved. But just as he had done so many times before, Arthur placed his trust in God. He reached out to the community, to his network of supporters, and to anyone who would listen, sharing the story of Hospital de Esperança and the work they were doing. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in, not just from Brazil, but from around the world. People were moved by the stories of the patients who had been helped, and they wanted to be a part of something that was making a real difference. With the additional funding, Arthur was able to expand the hospital, adding more beds, more equipment, and more staff. They also opened satellite clinics in nearby towns, bringing much-needed health care to even more people. The hospital continued to thrive, and with each passing day, Arthur saw more lives transformed by the care they provided. But Arthur's work didn't stop at the hospital. He continued to lead Luz e Vida and Novaterra, ensuring that both companies remained true to their missions. Luz e Vida continued to produce content that inspired and uplifted, reaching millions of people with messages of hope, faith, and love. Novaterra, meanwhile, expanded its focus, developing new technologies that addressed a wide range of humanitarian and environmental challenges. One of Novaterra's most ambitious projects was the development of a new type of housing for communities affected by natural disasters. The project, known as Casas de Esperanza, Houses of Hope, aimed to provide safe, sustainable, and affordable housing to families who had lost their homes to floods, earthquakes, and other disasters. The houses were designed to be easy to assemble, using locally sourced materials and incorporating innovative technologies that made them both environmentally friendly and resilient. The first Casas de Esperanza were built in a coastal town in northeastern Brazil that had been devastated by a hurricane. Arthur and his team worked closely with local leaders and community members to ensure that the houses met the needs of the families who would be living in them. The project was a resounding success, providing not just shelter, but a sense of stability and hope to families who had lost everything. As Arthur watched the first families move into their new homes, he was filled with a profound sense of gratitude. He knew that none of this would have been possible without God's guidance and the support of the many people who believed in his vision. The joy on the faces of the families, the laughter of the children as they explored their new homes. These were the moments that made all the challenges, all the sacrifices worthwhile. Arthur's work continued to expand in other areas as well. He launched new initiatives focused on education, believing that knowledge was a key to breaking the cycle of poverty. Luz e Vida began producing educational content for children, designed to be both engaging and informative, with a focus on Christian values. The content was distributed to schools across Brazil, reaching thousands of children and providing them with the tools they needed to succeed. Arthur also turned his attention to environmental conservation, an issue that had always been close to his heart. Novaterra partnered with several environmental organizations to develop programs that promoted sustainable practices in agriculture, fishing, and forestry. They also launched a reforestation initiative, planting thousands of trees in areas that had been devastated by deforestation. Through it all, Arthur remained deeply connected to his faith. He continued to pray daily, seeking God's guidance in every decision he made. He knew that the work he was doing was not just about building businesses or creating projects. It was about serving God and making a difference in the lives of others. And he never lost sight of the fact that everything he had accomplished was a gift from God, a blessing that he was called to share with the world. As the years passed, Arthur's influence continued to grow. He became a respected figure in Brazil and beyond, known not just for his business acumen, but for his unwavering commitment to his faith and his dedication to helping others. He was invited to speak at conferences, to share his story with audiences around the world, and to inspire others to pursue their own God-given dreams. But despite his success, Arthur remained humble. He continued to live a simple life, close to his family and his community. He never forgot where he came from or the struggles that had shaped him, and he continued to give generously, using his wealth to support causes that were close to his heart. One day, as Arthur was walking through the halls of Hospital de Esperanza, he was stopped by an elderly woman who had been a patient there. She took his hand in hers, her eyes filled with tears of gratitude. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You have no idea what this place means to us. You've given us hope when we had none. God bless you." Arthur smiled, his heart swelling with emotion. "It's not me you should thank," he replied gently. "It's God. He's the one who makes all of this possible. I'm just his servant." The woman nodded, her eyes shining with understanding. "And you serve him well, young man. You serve him well." As Arthur continued on his way, he thought about the woman's words. They were a reminder of the purpose that had guided him from the very beginning. A purpose that was rooted in his faith, his love for God, and his desire to make a difference in the world. Arthur knew that his journey was far from over. There were still so many challenges to face, so many lives to touch, so much work to be done. But he was ready. He had been given a great gift, and he was determined to use it to the fullest, to continue building a legacy of faith, generosity, and hope. And as he looked out at the world, at the countless lives that had been changed by the work he had been called to do, Arthur knew that he was exactly where he was meant to be. With God by his side, there was nothing he couldn't accomplish, and he was ready to continue the journey wherever it might lead. If this story moved you, please leave a comment below to share your thoughts and experiences. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, God bless you.